I don't know if I can take it anymore.
When you are depressed, you don't want to get
It
out of
seems
it.
so hard
You
today.
don't want to be bothered with anyone.
I don't have any
But
motivation.
overcoming depression is going to require that you get up and engage with life again.
All I want to do is sleep.
When you are feeling down, the worst thing you can do
The last thing
is
I want to do is
isolate
hang out
yourself,
with my friends.
because isolation actually intensifies sadness.
I don't think this will ever
So
go
I
away.
recommend finding a distraction that will shift your energy.
I wish somebody would just save me from this mental hell. Thank you for joining me on the Mental Health Podcast. This is your host, Barbie Moreno. I have with me Tracy Taris, who is a licensed marriage family therapist. She has a private practice in Santa Clarita, California, which is North LA County. And she's also the author of Many Voices, One Truth. Thank you for joining us, Tracy.
Yeah, thank you so much, Barbie, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thank you. So before we get into, we want to talk about the neurochemical aspect of it today. But before we get into that, can you give me an idea of maybe a little bit about yourself and why you got into therapy work?
Yeah, I got into therapy because it worked for me. Once I reached adulthood, I realized that there were some things from my childhood and things from my past and my family of origin that I needed to heal from, process, grieve, all of the above. So I went to therapy and it actually helped me. And so I had no plans on becoming a therapist myself. I would actually refer my friends and family to my therapist, who is Dr. Barbara Cohen in Tarzana, California. And they would go and see her. And then a few years later, I just had this thought that I should be a therapist, and it resonated with me. So I called my husband and three of my closest friends at the time and ran that by them. And each one of them thought it would be a great idea. They thought that it would be something that would come easily to me and that I would be really good at. And so I decided to apply for a program, Azusa Pacific, because it's a Christian university. I'm a Christian, and I wanted to marry the two, psychology and my faith, with, the idea of helping people. And so the rest is history. I got into the program and jumped through all the hoops, got the education and training, and shortly after getting licensed, I opened my private practice.
Love that. And what made you write your book?
My clients like listening to, like the book is about all of the different voices we hear. It really is a book about belief and what we choose to believe. So I use the analogy of the broadcast networks I grew up with. When I was little, we only had ABC, NBC, CBS, and PBS. There was cable, but in my household, we didn't have cable. So if you were watching anything at any given moment, you were listening to a broadcast from one of those stations. So in the book, I use the analogy of ABC, the analogy of ABC, the different networks, with the networks that play in the heads of most of our heads, like my clients, myself, most people that I talk to. And the name of those networks in the book are Self, Satan, Society, and Savior. And so it's about choosing who you believe. In the beginning of the book, I talk about one of the reasons I wrote it was we had a family crisis where one of my baby sisters had a stroke at a super young age. And some of the things that were coming up for me, some of the things I was believing, caused me to kind of question, well, what do I believe? What is at the core of some of my own belief systems? And then couple that with what I hear in my practice, I decided to write a book about the different voices that we hear and how to navigate those, how to differentiate between those, and choose the voice that is your creator, to choose to believe that you are who you were created to be.
And that thing that you believed was, if I remember from reading correctly, that somebody had read your palm basically and said that you have a short lifespan, right?
Yeah, my mom looked at my palm and told me that I was going to die young. And I believed that my whole life. Like once I grew up and I got my own therapy and everything, I stopped believing it, or so I thought. Like I thought I had dealt with that. And that's the thing about healing. You can deal with something to a certain level, but some things are just so deep that you might go to therapy, be in therapy for about 6 months or so and feel good, like get some healing. And then something will come up that shows that that problem runs at a deeper level. So the fact of my young sister, who was like 37 years old at the time, having the stroke, it brought up for me the deeper belief that, oh, I still believe, I still have this fear, or at least have this fear that I might die young. At the time I think I was 41 at the time. She was 37. So we were both still young,
Yeah.
and so it just kind of brought it to the surface. Her incident brought that belief for me to the surface, and I really had to confront it.
And I feel like, so I'm somebody who's been in therapy for, several number of years, and it seems like, and I've done a lot of self work, but it also seems like it's an ever going thing. Like people who think that you can go to therapy for a year and then everything is perfect. I just feel like it's a misbelief, right? Like it's a process. You're always growing, always changing, always uncovering things that you had no idea were sitting below the surface. And so I like the name Many Voices, One Truth, because we do all have these thoughts in our head. We have things our parents told us, most of our life growing up. And I mean, if you were told you were going to die young, then your whole life you're petrified you're going to die young, I would imagine.
I was, and like I said, I thought I had dealt with it as an adult, but not to the level that I really needed to. Like there are things that run deeper than others. Like you might go to therapy and, navigate something and process it and undo whatever needs to be undone in a year. But there's other things. I mean, because you've had a whole lifetime, you have a whole family of origin. There's things that were poured into you over decades of your life. And so therapy can help you to tease all of that out, figure out what's true and what's your truth, and get to the other side so that you're not debilitated by something or some label someone else put on you, even if that someone else was a parent.
Right. And oftentimes it is, right?
Oftentimes it is,
Yeah, I was like 90%. Well, and that brings us where we want to go into the neurochemical aspect of everything, because for me, I've heard a lot of people who say they don't want to go to therapy because they're not weak. They can solve it themselves. They don't believe that they need therapy. They think that they're just fine. They can fix it themselves. And oftentimes there's a shame that comes with working on your mental health. We're getting better, but I don't think that we're still in this place where it's acceptable to talk about the fact that you go to therapy and that you need somebody else to, guide you along your path. So give me some information on what you have learned about the neurochemical aspect of it.
Yeah, well, just to address what you were talking about with regards to reasons why people don't go, sometimes it is shame-based, and people have these deep beliefs about themselves that, shame has more to do with there's something wrong with me. So some people don't want to go and sit in somebody's office and have that, affirmed or validated. But one of the things I'd want to say to your listeners is to shop around, get online and put in some criteria for a therapist, and trust yourself to find the right fit for you, because most therapists, hopefully no therapist, but I can't speak for everyone, will judge you. Most of us see whatever is going on or whatever has happened as symptoms of something deeper. And our job is to help you figure out what that something deeper is so that you can process it and release it and get on with your life in the way that you want it to get on with your life. But one of the other reasons that's more along the lines of neurochemistry that people resist coming in is because on some level, they know that something will be uncovered, something will be revealed. And in our day-to-day life, we get used to feeling a certain way.
Right.
So people that are used to grief or stress or sadness, sometimes there's a hesitancy to let that go. On the forefront of your mind, you want to heal, you want to get through whatever it is you want to get through, but your brain and your body will often act against you. meaning that if you're used to hormones like the stress hormones of cortisol or homocysteine, that's what your body is used to running on. That's why it's hard for people to learn how to meditate, how to pray, how to be in silence, because when you do that, you shift your body chemistry. You shift the chemistry from stress and cortisol to peace and tranquility. You shift to serotonin and dopamine, which are the hormones that are responsible for, feeling good and feeling alive. And as much as people want that, you have to force yourself to get used to those chemicals coursing through your body rather than the cortisol. Because as long as you're used to what you're used to, you're going to keep getting what you've got. The way to break that is to force yourself to turn around and do something different. And therapy is a good tool for that because it forces you to bring up all this stuff to the surface so that you can grieve it. But in the grieving it, what happens in therapy when you are with a therapist that is good at their job and that is full of empathy, you will receive what we call a corrective emotional experience. So say, for instance, when you've had an emotional reaction to an experience out in the world or out in your family life, 20 years later, you come to therapy and you talk with the therapist about that experience, she or he provides what's called a corrective emotional experience, in that they sit with you, they empathize, they ask you questions, they get you to catharsis it out by getting you to talk about it and process it and get it out of your system. And they accept you and validate you and affirm you, which is what should have happened when you were little. And so being in therapy provides for that. And so what happens is there's a chemical called oxytocin, and it's the bonding chemical. It's what mothers, release when they have babies, is what people, when they're in intimate relationships, they release that. But it's not just about, intimacy and sex. It could be any intimate relationship where you're being validated and affirmed and your troubles are being held for you to look at and, pick apart and then, process them away. That you can have an experience with oxytocin. And so what our aim as therapists is to present a certain way of being in relationship in the therapy room so that people will go out in the world and look for that. Look for people who are validating and affirming. Because if you grew up with invalidation and you grew up in stressful relationships, more than likely that's what you've surrounded yourself with, even in jobs. Like people even will unconsciously pick a job where those same dynamics are recreated in that office. And so our hope is for people to learn how to understand that they are worthy and have value. And when you really believe that about yourself, you start to draw those other kinds of people toward you instead of the people that have constantly recreated the hurt that you grew up with.
Do you think that there's an unconscious fear that if I get better, the people who are in my life, I may lose?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's even conscious or subconscious. Like, your conscious mind is what you're aware of and what you're attending to in the moment. So right now, our conscious mind is at work, and our subconscious mind is we're aware of something. Like I'm aware that after this, I have a few clients before it's time for me to go home. I have to take my dog to the training, but I'm not really attending to that. I'm aware that there's cars outside and there's wind outside, but it doesn't come into my conscious unless I attend to it. Same thing for you. But in our unconscious mind, nobody knows what's in there. Our unconscious mind is always tending toward health and wholeness by letting us know what's there. And so there's lots of people that will want to go to therapy and then have this nagging fear that if I'm different, then my family will no longer accept me. And honestly, that might be the case for a while, because if you heal, if you present as different, then the people around you and the people that you grew up with, that's like holding up a mirror. You're not doing it on purpose, but they see that there's hope for them, but there may be a fear attached. There may be a fear attached to doing the work or not wanting to do the work for whatever reason. and a resentment for you doing it. Like, who do you think you are that, you're going to go out and get this therapy and come back and not be heavy laden with all the things we've always been heavy laden with.
Right. And if you're surrounding yourself with the comfortable environment that you have become used to, and you have these physical hormones that are already like in that space, right? And then you change things up, physically you're changing things up, and then the other people from the outside questioning you, it makes it hard to want to continue. And I think that that's why a lot of people don't continue to go through it.
Yeah. And that's why it's important to surround yourself with community of people that are in the same path as you. And sometimes you can find that on the job. Sometimes you can find that in houses of worship, where there's, a spiritual community that you can connect with. Usually most people will have at least one or two friends in their group, because even though we may be consciously and subconsciously drawn to people that just kind of recreate the same dynamics, there is a part of us that want to be whole. And so there may be, people that, you're drawn to, that you want in your space, that would validate who you are becoming. And it's not that you're necessarily becoming that, it's who you already are, but it's without all of the heartbreak and all of the pain. Like, for instance, like, I used to be a very anxious person, and I would move around really fast and on the go on. And that worked for me because it allowed me to get a lot of things done. It allowed me to accomplish a lot of things in my life. But curiously, all of the people that were closest to me were super chill. We're all laid back. Even my firstborn daughter, all laid back people, right? And it's because deep down, I was that too. I just trained myself to be frenetic and anxious and all over the place. And then once I started my own healing process, some of that started coming off. I'm still more A-type than most of my friends,
Right.
and things like that, but I'm a lot more, subdued, so to speak, but not in a negative way.
And I think society likes it when we're like that high motivated, person who's going. I know in my business career, before I got into this type of work, I was a super high achiever, always in leader club, like all of these different things. And so they continue to, give you rewards for this behavior. And so because you get rewarded for this behavior, and everybody's like, dang, she's good at what she does. She's the best. She's number one. She's this, she's that, or whatever. Then you want to continue to do it. However, like you were talking about with the body, there's the cortisone, the stress that comes from it, and it can literally eat away at your body and make you physically ill.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And that your brain will reward you too. And with the dopamine. And so you want to pay attention to that, and so we do pay attention to it on a subconscious level. And so then we keep going. But the reason you want to pay attention to it is you want that to be a source that's coming from who you really are and just your presence and your being instead of your doing, because that could happen too. Like when you're doing meditation and you're in states of prayer, you get all of that calm, and it's just from the internal rather than I've done this accomplishment and I'm getting these accolades, because then you put yourself in a hamster wheel where you always have to be accomplishing something or going after something.
And you identify with that's who you are.
Yeah, you identify with that's who you are, and it's not. It's what you do.
So when we talk about many voices and the things in our minds, right, going on, there's this like conscious movement where they're saying, basically you have to have no mind or clear mind, no thought. And I personally have a hard time with that, because our mind, in my opinion, physically is not made to have no thought, right? Like its whole idea is that it's supposed to keep you safe. It's on, it's always analyzing different things. And so I know there's a lot of people who have tried meditation, and they've tried even therapy, and they still feel like they're failing because they have voices in their head. And so what would you say to that as somebody who works with people, and how do you tell them that that's okay, that's normal?
Yeah, well, I'm with you. I don't think that there's, any such thing as no mind. That would be concerning. And meditation is hard when you have a lot going on and you're used to having a lot going on. So I teach my clients a couple of different ways to meditate. Like, one is using an app where there's a guided meditation. And, I prefer if people outside in nature or in a very quiet, place alone, where they don't have to worry about sitting through the 15, 20 minutes, because they're listening to the person on the app doing some guiding, and they're bringing their thoughts to what the person is saying. And so you just let yourself be there in the moment. That's one tool that I use. The other tool that I use is something called block meditation, where, let's say if you're going to do 10 or 15 minutes, the first 2 or 3 minutes is something called grounding. So you would split this meditation into 3 blocks. The first block is grounding, where you are taking in what's coming in through your 5 senses. So I tell them to start with their eyes. And, you look around the room and you mentally name the things that you see. I see a window, I see a lamp, a couch, my computer, and then you move to your ears and you attend to what the sounds are that are coming in. And for me right now, it's the silence of the room, or the AC, the cars outside, the wind outside, and then you move to your nose. So it's like this, and you name the smells. I smell the rose lotion on my hands and the way my office smells. And then you move to your mouth. What do I taste? I taste the water that I had a second ago when I was drinking the water. And then I feel my bum sitting on this chair. I feel my feet in my shoes, the denim on my jeans. And you take about, 2 or 3 minutes to just mentally drop down into yourself, to ground it, because that helps you to ground into the present moment. One of the reasons meditation is so hard is because we do have all these thoughts that's going on. So if you ground yourself, and you can do this anywhere, it doesn't have to be in block meditation. It could be standing in a line at the grocery store or at the bank, and, in the middle of a panic attack, like bringing yourself down so that
that's what I was going to go with, that one on a panic attack, because that seems like that would be an amazing tool.
Oh, yes, it is, because it forces you to bring your mind in instead of being out in either your environment or just whatever's playing around in your head. So then the second part of that block meditation would be, let's say about 5 minutes of picking a focus word, and what that means is you think of a word, and then you just allow yourself to see that word. Write it on a chalkboard in the screen of your mind, or write it out in space. Like if you're on the Starship Enterprise and there's a word out on the black space with the stars, with just that word, whether it's focus, whether it's clarity, whether it's peace, whatever the word is. And you want to just keep your mind. And most of us have like watches, either Fitbits or Apple Watches or whatever. You could set a timer when you're first doing this, so that the timer goes off after the 2 minutes, and you set it for the 7 minutes. And then for the last 8 minutes of the 15 minutes, you want to visualize something that you want in your life. So if you're visualizing harmony within your family, what would that look like? Would that look like, 2 or 3 times a week, or every night we have dinner together? Would it look like sitting down, having a family conversation? Would it look like travel? Whatever it is you want to see in your life, visualizing it, and sitting with it for that last 8 minutes of the session. And so like when I teach people using those 2 tools, eventually they learn to meditate on their own without any aids whatsoever.
What do you see changing in the industry right now?
Well, I think that, as far as my colleagues, like I belong to several professional organizations, and, sometimes there's consultation groups and things like that. So I think that more and more therapists are using things like prayer and meditation and mindfulness practices. And so when you're looking for someone, look for someone who offers that, or even if it's not on their site, ask them what is their experience with that. Because the research behind prayer and meditation is such that it is so effective in calming people's anxiety and changing the neurochemistry of your brain, that, I think a lot of therapists are like, if there's people out there that's not using that, then they're probably using something else that would help with that. But in today's climate, in today's profession, in the field, people are actually using some form of meditation, mindfulness, prayer practices, silence. I even recommend that if my clients, especially if they suffer with anxiety a lot, to look for silent retreats. I mean, this is California, so it's probably wouldn't be hard to find one, and if you're in the state where there's not a lot of that going on, look for neighboring cities or neighboring states that offer things like quiet retreats or silent retreats, because a whole day of silence could do wonders for your brain and wonders, for yourself as a person. So I would do my homework and look for someone that does offer it. Like, everyone has different ways of teaching it or different ways of introducing clients into the practice, but there's a lot of it now, just because the research is just so vast. It's also good for sleep, like people who meditate at least once a day, but definitely twice a day, have better chance of going to sleep and staying to sleep, fewer chances of having sleep issues and things like that. So it's so good for so many different areas of your life, your relationship, your brain chemistry, your physical, sense of self. And yeah.
I saw on your site too that you mentioned writing. What do you tell people to do when you talk about writing?
Some of the writing that I would tell people to do is for emotional wellness, where, they'll journal what's coming to them. And one of the easiest ways to get people to write is using, I think it's Julie Cameron's morning pages. And morning pages are every morning before you get started, before you do anything, you write out 3 pages, front and back. Like, so at the end, it'll be a page and a half, because you do the front page, the back of the page for the second page, and then the third page. And it's just free flow, where whatever is coming to mind, you write it on a piece of paper and you let yourself flow. Even if it's something like, this is a dumb assignment, I have nothing to say, you just write whatever is coming to you. And so what happens is, eventually things that are deep down in there will come to the surface, because the act of writing gives yourself, you mean your inner self, permission to release things. Like, we hold on to so many things in our psyche for fear of either having to face them or being hurt all over again. But writing is one of those things that will help a person to identify what's deep down in there, and even not even what's deep, like what's just below the surface for some people, so that you can start teasing it out, looking at it, and maybe even bring it into therapy for us to review together. Some of the things that I do with families, I do have a workbook where there are therapy exercises that are designed to help the family to see or get an idea of what's going on globally within the family system, because in every family, there's something that we in the field call the identified patient. And the identified patient is usually the person that the family pushes to go to therapy for their issue. But once the person comes in, sometimes it is their issue. Sometimes it is they're the ones suffering with, X, Y, and Z. But sometimes what is revealed is that they are carrying the anxiety of the family system, and it is manifesting in bad school behavior or drinking or smoking or something like that, but they're the one carrying it all. And so whenever I work with a family, sometimes I will do exercises that are designed to help them to see themselves globally as a unit, like they're parts of a whole. And, if there's a part of, like, if you have a car and just one thing is malfunctioning, that car is not going to go very far. So, like, one of the interventions that I have is called the sailboat and a lighthouse, where they draw on a big piece of paper. They all draw like some water, a lighthouse, a boat. And then there's questions like, who's in the boat with you? And how is that person helping you? Is the lighthouse on? Like, it's like Does the family have a true north? Like, does the family have something that guides them, safely to shore? Or do they feel like they're just out and about in the boat by themselves, and even though all of them are in the boat, no one's taking care of one another? So, it just provides, there's a lot of things that will provide a lot of information for them to think about and reflect on what's going on in their family system, and to help them to navigate well.
I like the idea of the family therapy, because I feel like, at least from my own personal experiences and those that I've talked to, that oftentimes when one person gets quote unquote better, right, then it creates a harsh environment in the home, because there's this battle back and forth of, this is the way things used to be. And we kind of addressed this earlier, right? But these are the things that I was used to, and now you're doing this and you're changing, and da 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 da. Whereas if you do it together as a family, the family grows together.
Yeah. And it prevents the whole identified patient thing, because if there's something wrong with one person in the family, because the family is a unit, then often there's an indication that there's something going on underneath, the surface. Now, a lot of times parents don't want to hear this.
Right.
Families will often, it's something that you have to tread lightly and navigate carefully, because for some people, if they aren't ready and something gets revealed, then they'll pull out of therapy because they don't want to see it.
Mhm.
And, it's like denial is there for a reason. That's in school. We're in grad school, we're taught that, how to not take away a person's denial too soon, because it's there for a reason. People think of denial as a bad thing, but sometimes denial is the thing that's holding a person together. And when they are ready, for it to be worked on, they'll come back, so yeah.
What do you think is one of the greatest tools you have discovered, both as somebody who does work on yourself, and continues to grow, and also as a therapist? So I would like to go, two answers to that, one for yourself and one as a therapist.
The greatest tool for myself?
Yeah.
Well, for me, it's getting therapy and my relationship with God, my relationship with Jesus Christ. Like, I've done a lot of work on figuring out, how do I believe what the Bible says with regards to who I am as a person, instead of who I was told I was, whether from my parents growing up or other authority figures, aunts and uncles, or teachers or whatever. And so for me, latching on to and choosing to believe that I am who God says I am in his word has been very helpful for me. Same thing when I work with people who are Christians, because I do identify as a Christian therapist. And so sometimes people will choose me for their therapist because they want to integrate their faith. And it's not just Christians who will choose me. Sometimes people that are Buddhist and other faith systems as well, because they want faith as a component. And so I will ask them questions about their faith and help them learn how to integrate their own beliefs. Like, I don't put my beliefs, because even in the Christian world, that Christian people believe different things. So it's like, I will ask them about, their own faith, system. For people who aren't necessarily people of faith or any kind of religion whatsoever, the greatest tool is still the same. It's the mind, because in all of these, it's what you're thinking, how you're thinking about it. How can you challenge these thoughts with the truth or with an alternate perspective? Because there's nothing on the outside of you that can make you feel or do anything. It's what you're thinking about, the things that are going on the outside of you. So I teach them this tool called a thought record, where they pay attention to what it is they're thinking. How do they feel? What was the automatic thought? And what is an alternative way of looking at this thing that just happened, so that it soothes some of the energy and some of the heat of the emotion from whatever has gone on. And so I teach them how to use that tool on their own, so that they can be more mindful of what it is they're thinking about, and they're not pulled to and fro here and there by whatever thoughts are popping into their minds.
I like the tools that you are teaching. Do you do workshops? Because these seem like a great amount of tools that could be taught to a group of people, and where they don't, take it all in one day, but they write down the tools and gradually try to, use them in their day-to-day life without actually having, maybe they can't drive to Santa Clarita, although I imagine you do Zoom.
Yeah.
But are there any workshops that people can go see you at?
Yeah, I do workshops, and it's usually either through the city of Santa Clarita or through College of the Canyons, which is the community college here in Santa Clarita. And I do just out in the community, different, like for single moms or for women or whatever. But yes, yeah, I last summer I did a series where I did webinars, like I went live on Facebook. And I believe you can find those on my website, tracytaris.com. Or if you just do go Google Tracy Taris webinar, you could probably find whatever I've done out there. And usually when I teach those, they're always packed with practicals that people can use, because I believe that information is just information unless it's something that you can apply to your life. Right. And so typically, if you do attend a workshop, and any workshops that I do on my own, I'll advertise it on like TikTok or Instagram and things like that.
And Taris is Taris for those that are.
And Tracy, Tracy. Yeah.
And so this then brings me to maybe considering, if you don't already have it, maybe you have it, a workbook.
A workbook for some of the things that I teach.
Yeah, just because, and the reason why I'm so interested in this is because I've done a lot of self-help work, right? And there's a lot of information that I've gotten from, research and all of these different things, and it's not applicable to my life. Yeah. And so I'm sitting there working on all of these things, and it's just something that I, like it's either too time consuming, right? Or it's not down to earth enough. It's kind of like I was talking about how people want you to have, some people teach you have no mind, no thought. And then that will make you more depressed. If you're in like you're trying to work on your consciousness, and then they're teaching you that you should have no thought, and you can't get to that place, then you're just like, now I'm failing at having no thought. Like, this is horrible, And so I feel like there needs to be, and there's all kinds of lovely people out there, but you seem to have a significant amount of useful tools that people can use in their day-to-day life. The one with the anxiety, where you talk about just, looking at the ears, the eyes, the nose, the mouth, all of these different little things, I think are practical that people could walk away with. So I'm just trying to give people I'm just trying to give people a place to get that information from you.
Well, you're the third person and within this last couple of weeks to ask me for a workbook. I don't have a workbook, but I will write a workbook. And for now, like if people join my email list, there's like the webinars that I did last year, you can get it through your association with that. And then you can email me through there and ask me for it, and I will send you. But I think I will sit down and cultivate a workbook. I never really thought about doing it, because when I do the workshops, and even in the book that I wrote, these exercises are in there. Like I've had people ask me to do a workbook for the book, people who have read the book. Yeah. I'll create one.
Yeah, I think if 3 people in the last, couple of weeks have told you, it's probably a message for you that's needed, because it really, I feel like there's so much there's so many people suffering who don't have the tools, or maybe they don't even have the money to go to therapy. Maybe they don't have the insurance, or whatever the case may be, who just need a place to start. That's reasonable, like I said, because there's so many different things that people say to do. And if you're not even in a space if you're like at the very, very, very lowest point, and for somebody to try to get you to the very highest point, it just feels like you're failing, because it's not steps in between. And I think that the tools that you teach are the steps in between, right? And there's also no ending. That's the other thing. I feel like people are like, oh, I'll be better. It's like, you're always evolving, right? And it seems like you talk about that a lot.
Yeah. Well, you are always evolving, but you also get better. You just get better and better. And something that you said with regards to there's a workbook that you have, but a lot of it is not relevant to you. One of the things I'd want to point out to your listeners is what, like, because consumers, meaning like people that come in for therapy, or they don't know the difference between a therapist, a psychologist, a psychiatrist, and a life coach. And so I've received clients a few times that are out there looking for a therapist, and they end up finding a life coach that's, specialized in one or two areas or whatever, but is trying to treat them as if they're a therapist, and they just don't have the training for it. Like, if you want to figure out, what do I want my career to be, or something that's specific that will propel you forward, like get you unstuck in life, a life coach is good for that. But if you have things that need to come up and come out and be resolved, grieved and processed and healed, then you should see a therapist and look for people. Don't just look at the letters behind the person's name. One of the reasons why you're saying what I'm saying is useful is because there are many voices out there. There are many voices out on social media and out in the world, and people can take like a 6-week or 6-month course and call themselves an expert, and you go and see this person and you're realizing I'm not really getting a lot of meat here. And it's because you need to see someone, depending on what's going on with you, you might need to see someone that has jumped through all the hoops of all of these years of schooling and training and, getting the education and the, experience in working with these high level type needs. And so seeking out for yourself, someone that if you need a life coach, make sure that it's something specific that's going to move you from point A to point B. But if there's things going on in your life where you feel trapped, stuck, there's grief, there's loss, there's depression and anxiety, and just any kind of mental health symptoms going on, look for someone that is either a therapist or a psychologist. Those are the same two people, except the psychologist has more years in education and is a lot more research oriented. A psychiatrist is a medical doctor, an MD, that is concerned with the brain and will prescribe medication. Some psychiatrists will provide some therapy, but most psychiatrists will send you out to see a therapist in conjunction with working with him or her with the medication piece. So when you're looking for credentials, don't just pay attention to the letters behind a person's name, because those letters can mean anything.
I love that. Thank you for all of the amazing information that's digestible and the tools that people have. And again, if you could give us your website and your handles, like on IG and TikTok, if you know them.
Okay, so I'm at Tracy Taris for Instagram and at Healing the Mind and Spirit. My websites are the same, healingthemindandspirit.com and tracytaris.com. And if you go to my website, please join my email list, because you can get a lot of my resources by being a member of that email list. I send out blogs once a month, probably every 3 weeks or so, but it averages to be about once a month. And sometimes I will do a series where, when I do series, I do it once a week, where I'm sending out more and more information on some topic. Like my next book will be about identity. And so over the whatever I do next and I put out there will be talking about, the idea that you don't look for your identity. You already have it. You've already been created. The problem is you have to peel off all the layers that have been heaped onto you so that you can live as the person that you're already created to be, so that you can cultivate the talents that are already in there, whether they're talents you've dabbled in or whether they're talents that you don't even know are there,
Yeah. And see, this is why I just love all the information that you have so much, because it is so valid and so true. I actually perused your website and did read some of your blogs, and you do have one on the identity in there. And so for those who are listening, I absolutely say go to the blog, because just reading through your blogs gave me a bunch of information, new information. There's always information to learn. And it sounds like you are a person that is worth learning it from. I thank you so much.
Thank you for saying that, Barbie.
And give us the name of your book one more time.
Many Voices, One Truth. It's available on Amazon and other places too, but Amazon is probably the easiest and the quickest to get it.
Thank you, Tracy.
You're welcome.
We appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. Mm-hmm.